Good morning, family. Happy Tuesday. Today's election day. And this is going to be my only live for today. But I wanted to share with you all something. So, everybody knows I'm a spiritualist. And so, for me, this is not something that I just discovered on the way to, I don't know, change my game up or whatever. It's who I've been my whole life. And so, today I want to share with you when I vote, I voted already, but I tend to think about my ancestors who paved the way for me and elders who are now ancestors who paved the way for me and my elders as well. And this summer, when I went to go visit where my great great grandmother, who was born in 1817, is buried in the Eden Cemetery in Pennsylvania, on the outskirts of Philly, I discovered she was buried in a section of the cemetery called Cato. And not only is she buried there, my great grandmother and my grandmother all buried there, and other relatives as well. But what I learned is that who was Cato? Who was Cato? I thought to myself, who is this man? Because I never heard of Cato. And when I was there, I came across where he was buried. And so as we go out and vote today, I'm going to share with you all this very short video and documentary about him. And you should share this with your children. His name is Octavius Valentine Cato. And I'm going to share this with you all. And I pray that we would all share this with everyone, old, young, the whole nine, because I was just impressed with this man. And I feel like this is something that we should all be sharing. So y'all let me know if you hear this sound, okay? Because I'm about to press this play button. So hold on, y'all. I've never done it quite like this before.
As election day dawns, Cato heads to his classroom at the Institute.
As he left his house this day, he had the looming threat of violence all around him. The hospital was busy catering to riot victims. People are shouting. There's chaos, a sense of anarchy on the streets of Philadelphia that day.
Behind the school, McMullen's henchmen Reddy Deaver and Frank Kelly spot a black man, Isaac Chase, as he emerges from his door. Chase rushes back inside, but they follow him. And in front of his 11-year-old daughter, they murder him.
What is really going on is working class immigrant resentment at Philadelphia's white Republican elite, which is focused on this influx of a black population, which is taking away jobs from Irish immigrants. Put that explosive mix together, and that's where you get a riot.
And then you've got the police not doing anything, and you've got black people on rooftops shouting.
McMullen appears a moment later. He commands the whites to move on. At the same time, Cato heads to the office of Democratic Mayor Daniel Fox, demanding he call in federal troops. On his way back, Cato checks in at the headquarters of his National Guard unit to enlist them to keep the peace in Philadelphia. He walks to a pawn shop to purchase a gun and turns towards South Street, 1 block away. He's accosted by McMullen's operatives.
And they walk by him and then call his name. And when he turns around, they shoot him. And Cato then struggles to move away from them. They follow him and shoot him again. And at that point, then a policeman comes along and he's struggling for his life in the policeman's arms.
As the morning breaks, William Stokely and the Republicans have swept into power. Octavius Cato's funeral shuts city offices. Thousands of citizens walk along 125 carriages to the cemetery. There, Caroline LeCount loses control. Collapsing aside the grave, she begs God and Octavius to take her too.
All right, family. Let me stop this share. So you're probably wondering, why did I share that video? Who is Octavius? Valentin Cato. And when I was this summer, when I was visiting my grandmother's, who's buried in his section of the cemetery that's named for him, I got a chance to read a little bit about him like immediately on the spot, because there is a marker. He's buried there. And as we look at the voting, and I know everybody has their opinions, I have my own as well. But when you see things like this in the historical record, and it's attached to who you are, definitely attached to who I am, who my ancestors are, what they have done for me, what they have paid for me, and not in some generic sense, because sometimes we use things generically and it kind of don't really mean much or nothing for some of us. But for me, it means a lot. I'm trying to find, God, I'm trying to find the marker so I can read you all. Let me just hit it right here. I was going to show you the marker, but I guess I just have to read it myself. So this is who it says that this gentleman is. Let me see. Will this clear up so I can read it? There you go. I put my glasses on. I wanted to show y'all this, but it won't let me come up. But this gentleman was born in 1839. He died in 1817. Now, this gentleman worked at he was the headmaster of the school for colored youth, which later became Cheyney University. I had a lot of relatives in my family who attended Cheyney University. One of my favorite cousins went to Cheyney and graduated from Cheyney. I think during this election era, we need to really dig back in our history. Don't let people convince you that your ancestor story don't mean nothing, because that's kind of how we get duped when we buy into the narrative that, you know, it don't really mean much or nothing. This is Cato. This is where he's buried, in the same cemetery where my foremothers are buried at. And I'm trying to pull up what this marker says, because this is going to tell you who the man is. And I think sometimes we don't always know who people are, who laid it down for us. This man was killed in 1871 on election day, October the 10th, right in front of the election poll. He was really into Black folks voting, registering to vote. But I just gotta, hold on, family. I just gotta read you his marker. I'm trying to find one that's clear where I can really see it and read it for you. Because when I seen who this man, first of all, my grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, and my great-grandmother, and some other relatives are buried in his section of the cemetery in Eden Cemetery in Pennsylvania. And you know how, like, you go to a section of a cemetery, it has a name, you don't really trip off of it much. I really didn't trip off of it. But it was Sunset Cato. Who was Cato? Now, mind you, this is a Black historical cemetery that I'm at. You know what I'm saying? That these full of a lot of progressive people. But Cato, when I really got to understand who he was, I was floored. I was floored and maybe a little embarrassed, because I felt like we should know who this man is. We should know his contribution. We should know how much he is connected to us right now. And I don't care who you vote for. This is not about Republican, Democrat, Trump, Biden. I don't give a damn about none of them. But if you understand this man's background, if you understood his background, that's what got me. And I wish to God I can, let me look at one more thing. I usually have stuff ready, y'all, but I just call myself trying to do this live before I run out the door. But now I'm gonna pull up. Oh, I can probably pull this up on my phone, y'all. Hold on. Because I was just there. And let me show you, it just blew my mind. That's all I can say. It really blew my mind. And so give me just a minute, y'all. Let me just pull this up. Let me just pull this up for y'all, because I think it is imperative, especially in today's time, that we know who really put it down for us, family, and why we really owe them everything. And I mean everything. I don't mean like, sometimes we get caught up in this, I'm doing me, but you can never do you, because somebody did them so that you can do you. So this is who he is, y'all. I found it. I'm going to read this to you, and I'm going to make it big. I'm sorry for those loud interruptions. But this is Octavius Valentin Butler. Octavius Valentin Cato was a phenomenal scholar and a dominant leader in the civil rights movement of the mid-1800s, who led efforts to register thousands, y'all, thousands of African Americans to vote. He worked tirelessly in the face of violence and open hostility towards Black participants. Sorry, family. In the political process. Cato was a member of numerous civil, patriotic, libertarian, and political groups, including the Franklin Institute and the Union League Association. He was the headmaster of the Institute for the Colored Youth, later named Cheyney University. He served in Pennsylvania National Guard as a major in the Union Army during the Civil War. He was assassinated on Election Day, October the 10th, in 1871, in front of a polling place on 1700 block of South Street in South Philadelphia, which is heavily now an Italian area. So when you see this man, and when you go out to vote today, even if you grew up, you don't know your grandmama, whatever the hell, it don't even matter. Somebody like Cato put it down for you. We can no longer sit on the side and say, woe is me. When people put it down for you, this man was murdered in broad daylight on Election Day, October the 10th. And so we owe it to them. You know what I mean? People say, do it for the culture. Okay, this is part of our culture. This is Octavius. This is Octavius Cato. This is a gentleman. I hope this man fought in the Civil War. He recruited Blacks to fight in the Civil War for our ancestors' freedom. However you want to spin it. I don't judge shit because I wasn't in the time. And I can guarantee you, my absolute worst day is better than my ancestors' best day in the United States. Okay, so with that being said, y'all, the last thing I'm going to play for y'all, because I think we owe it to ourselves, family. We owe it to ourselves to know the stories of our ancestors. I'm going to show this last video, and then we're going to get up out of here. Well, I'm going to get up out of here because I got to go to work. So let's see. Let me see. Let me get this right, family. So please stop. Somebody's like sending me stuff. Please stop sending me stuff right now. Jesus Christ. All right, here we go, family. This is the last one. A lot of people don't know, but a lot of this stuff has fueled my life, to be honest with you. It has totally fueled my life. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna move something over here. Oh, great, it's up like that. Here we go, family.
Octavius V. Cato exemplified the best qualities of his generation. He excelled in sports. He excelled in academics. He excelled in community leadership. He was the future perfect for the African American community. And had he not been cut short, mid-19th century Philadelphia bustles with industry, immigration, and post-Civil War promise, especially for the city's African American community. Octavius Valentine Cato embodies the community's hopes and the city's tensions. There was this urgency for not just enjoying the trappings of freedom, but the urgency to participate in the process, the urgency to rise above all expectations, the urgency to break down the barriers. And that's why many people call this period of Cato the first civil rights movement. This desire to exercise your freedom is just so human. It's just so human that why not? Why not? Catto was born in South Carolina in 1839 to free mixed-race parents. In 1848, his father, then a widower, moves the family to Philadelphia. In many ways, Philadelphia is one of the most precarious cities of the North, at least for free Black Philadelphians. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, passed just 2 years after the Catto family arrives in Philadelphia, incentivizes the kidnapping of free Blacks. Even in the North, abolitionists face violent opposition.
Mob was a verb in that era. It was a verb that described what white men and boys quite often did if there was an anti-slavery lecture or meeting in town. They would mob that effect.
How free is free when you worry constantly about your children's safety, about whether or not they will be kidnapped and tortured for you to never see again?
Free Black Philadelphians find safety and solace in each other and in institutions, like the Institute for Colored Youth, an advanced academic high school that trains students for intellectual careers. Octavius Catto enrolls in 1854 at the age of 15 and graduates valedictorian 4 years later. In 1859, he returns to the Institute for Colored Youth to teach. The Civil War propels Catto into activism. Pennsylvania faces an emergency when the Confederate Army invades the state in June of 1863.
Catto raises a company of Black volunteers to join the Pennsylvania Emergency Militia. The company that Catto recruits presents itself at Harrisburg to the commandant of the Department of the Susquehanna, Darius Couch. Couch refuses their services. Couch makes it clear that in Pennsylvania, only the services of white volunteers have been asked for. And so Catto's company is turned away.
With the North victorious, slavery ends in 1865, but exclusion based on race doesn't end. Like many young men, Catto loves to play baseball. He is the captain of the Philadelphia Pythians, who go undefeated in their first season. In 1867, he appears before the National Association of Baseball Players and makes the case for his all-Black team to be allowed into the league.
In a lot of respects, he was the Jackie Robinson of his day. Like today, sports is kind of like the last frontier. If you can break the barrier in sports, then the rest of society kind of follows suit. So I'm certain that Catto must have understood how important it would be for Blacks to do well in baseball. Not white baseball and Black baseball, but baseball together.
Out of 266 other applicants, Catto's team is the only one with Black players. And when the decision comes down, they are the only team denied admission.
He worked very hard to try to integrate it. He didn't succeed, but he had a vision that was so far ahead of where others were.
African Americans believe the end of slavery will usher in a new era, and Catto's generation won't be deterred from fighting for equal rights.
With each generation, the actions become much more aggressive. And I think it culminates with the activities of LeCompte and Catto.
Octavius Catto and Caroline LeCompte meet at the Institute for Colored Youth. fall in love as activists, and plan to marry.
These were students who had come out of school that really empowered them, that they were change makers.
In 1867, Caddo and LeCount succeed in their long-standing campaign to integrate city streetcars.
So Octavius Caddo is pushing for a state bill to open up the streetcars for everyone. Carrie LeCount has a plan to make sure it's enforced.
When a streetcar driver refuses to let her board, LeCount obtains a court order. The driver is fined the equivalent of $1,000 in today's money. To Blacks living in the South Street corridor, the heart of the city's elite Black life, this is a victory. To poor whites who live across the street in Moyamensing, it's a warning sign. Competing for low-wage jobs, whites see Black rights as a threat. They denounce African Americans like Caddo as members of an inferior race trying to displace them.
One thing which keeps this from going lethal is the fact that Blacks cannot vote. So Blacks are, for all practical purposes, politically powerless. That will change dramatically when the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution are adopted.
Passed in 1868, the 14th Amendment grants automatic citizenship to anyone born in the United States. The 15th Amendment, passed in 1870, gives Black men the right to vote.
The African American population in Philadelphia at the time of Caddo was 11%. That was a serious threat.
That set off what modern Americans might call a white backlash.
Political, economic, and racial tensions collide in Philadelphia's election of 1871. Octavius Caddo leads a registration drive for new Black voters, hoping to have an influence over city elections for the first time. Neighborhood boss William McMullen gathers the Moyamensing Fire Company in his saloon. He urges them to maintain white rule with the same kind of mob violence seen during slavery.
On election day, in organized fashion, police and Moya Ho's men physically beat up and took Black voters out of line, accosted Black men in the street. It was a day filled with terror if you were African American.
Six Black men are shot.
Octavius Caddo goes to the office of Mayor Daniel Fox and begs for the city to intervene. But Fox has no interest in protecting Black voters. So he turns to Caddo and says, "You'd better protect yourself."
He goes to their Walmart and buys a gun. It has no bullets in it. And he starts walking back home.
As he walks home, a white man, already bandaged from the day's violence, spots Caddo on South Street. And shoots him dead.
His remains are taken back to the Institute for Colored Youth, the school that he helped to run. And people from the neighborhood came that night to pay their respects and gathered around that schoolhouse right there at 9th and Bainbridge. It's still there today. And encircled that building as if to embrace it and protect it.
Octavius V. Caddo's funeral procession will be one of the largest Philadelphia has ever seen, second only to Abraham Lincoln's.
They were great inspirational figures. And so their death were not only tragic and devastating, but it removed these very voices that people followed. Black people knew that there was enormous risk in terms of life and death in coming up against white supremacy. But we have many examples of them continuing to do so.
Octavius B. Cattle's life and death leave future generations with questions we as a nation still face.
What will be the direction for the lives of people of color? How will Black men and women live in a nation where slavery no longer exists, but it's very clear that equal rights, that citizenship, that these very ideas will continue to be contested and are contested for centuries to come?